You know, way back when on this channel, I did a video about Bruce Wayne being the Mask. It seems like a weird video for me to have done in retrospect, and it probably does not hold up in the slightest, but it tells you that I've been a fan of Batman for a very long time. From comics to the animated series, which is my favourite Batman adaptation, all the way to the movies. Now, I have my favourite Batman movies like Batman Returns, The Batman, Batman Begins, and then there's the big cultural phenomenons like The Dark Knight, but there's only one movie that I think is a true landmark for the character, the one adaptation that truly defines Batman and what it means to be and love that character, the one true definitive version, and that's the Lego Batman movie. Comic book movies have nearly always had this issue where they're sort of ashamed to be comic book movies. They make fun of the material, they look down on some of the sillier aspects of the comic medium, but the issue is that it just kind of feels like they're pedestaling themselves above the source material, which is ridiculous because they wouldn't exist without it, and comic book movies are inherently goofy, so you can't pick and choose what you think is cool and what isn't. And B, it only serves to alienate the pre-existing fan base who you're counting on to pay to see your movie. Think the first X-Men film where they make fun of the yellow spandex outfits, even though that's a core feature to the X-Men aesthetic. It just seems like a cheap jab at those who built what you're using as inspiration. And now the Lego Batman does this too. It pokes fun at the source material, previous movies, and basically every aspect of the character's canon. But the important thing is that it doesn't look down on the character at all. It embraces these silly things. It understands that the quirkiness of Batman is a part of his history and comic book movie history as a whole, and it's very easy to look down on something when you're doing a comedy, especially one that teeters on parody. But the idea is to look at the intent of the joke, the feeling of it. Like, there's a joke in this movie about Egghead egging the bat signal and therefore the police can't call for Batman and thus the gig is up. It's a goofy joke about Batman only being able to be reached via the bat signal and points out how, at least in movie form, no villains have ever attacked it before, which seems like an obvious thing to do. It's a funny quirk to point out, so initially it's funny and cute because maybe the audience member had never thought about it. But then they bring in Batman anyway, because ultimately he doesn't require the bat signal to know when Gotham is in trouble, which kills the plot hole they're poking fun at because they aren't making fun of the character viciously. It's playful and comes from a place of understanding the character and its world. For as much as I love Into the Spiderverse, there's that one moment where they poke fun at Spider-Man 3, which also feels playful, but the issue is it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the film they're poking fun at. It's like they're looking down on it. In Spider-Man 3, Peter Parker bonds with the symbiote, which exaggerates his feelings and traits, which in that film his growing ego becomes a major shift in the character. So the symbiote enhances it and makes him very arrogant and confident, thus we get the awkward scene of him dancing and whatnot. Now, not only is there a goofy song playing over it to demonstrate to the audience that this is intentional comedy, but people are also looking at him strangely because this isn't what the movie thinks is cool. This is what Peter Parker, an uncool nerd, thinks is cool. Now, this movie is pretty rough for many other reasons, but this one sequence is not one of them. But the internet has had this misunderstanding and us as a culture have run with it, so when Spiderverse pokes fun at it, saying we don't talk about this, it's like they're ashamed of it. It's showing they don't actually understand that movie. They're just following suit with what people make fun of with Spider-Man. And then in the Lego Batman movie, we have a version of this montage where Alfred flicks through the phases Batman had, and they mention his weird phase in the 60s. But check the wording. In the Spiderverse example, they say, we don't talk about this, whereas in the Lego Batman version, they just say, it was a weird phase, because they understand the Adam West take on the character was intentionally campy and was supposed to be a bit funny and weird. Also, later on, Alfred dresses up as the Adam West Batman and says he misses the 60s. It's in good taste, and I think this comparison is important, because this movie came out 1 year before Spiderverse and both were were produced by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. So it's not a stretch to say Spiderverse took influence through the producers from this scene and applied a similar one to Spider-Man. The issue is Lego Batman was written by a lot of people who love the character, who understand that montage and its intention. Whereas Phil Lord co-wrote Spiderverse, which makes me think he wanted to replicate it but just didn't understand why that worked. The montage in the Lego Batman movie isn't just simply making fun of a character's previous adaptation, but loving and appreciating the journey they've had. And that comes with understanding the source material. Loving a character and appreciating them sometimes isn't enough, you need to get them. Yes, there's interpretations and that's what makes art beautiful, but there is an established order to all things and Batman is no exception. The smallest and most shallow example is the barrage of villain name drops they give in that one sequence. It's just a flexing of knowledge, and immediately lets the audience know that this is made by people who have done their research, that know what they're talking about. Other aspects like how this entire movie hinges on the relationship between Batman and the Joker being partially romantic, they have this sort of will they won't they, which is a fundamental to their stories. It's one of the things that The Dark Knight does exceptionally well, at least on one side of them. Minor things like the computer calling him Batman at all times and never Bruce, which goes towards the ideology that Batman is who he is and Bruce Wayne is the mask. And it drives home the maddening loneliness of this character, and when he's talking to the family portrait he tells them that he wishes they could have seen him, they'd be proud of him. And obviously this is played off for laughs, but it's also strangely faithful because Bruce Wayne is essentially a man baby. He's an emotionally stunted man whose parental issues have caused him lifelong pain, and it's driven him to this life of being a vigilante, which is also important to the thread of Robin being his adoptive son, because this film really drives home the chain of events in Bruce Wayne's life. Alfred became Bruce's surrogate parent, as Bruce does for so many of the Robins, which is something that this film introduces that near no other Batman movie explores besides Batman and Robin, and that's the Bat family. Robin and the rest of the Bat family are so fundamental to Batman as a character, and it's insane that no other adaptation has even come close to exploring them in this way. Most adaptations are not even interested in the slightest in trying, but Robin as a character represents Bruce's tendency to project himself onto others. Robin is often a child forced to grow up and become exactly like Bruce, the greatest example of that being Dick Grayson, who features in this. I love so much this movie has Robin, and that it doesn't shy away from any of the silly aspects of the character, and at the end of the day, Gotham comes together to save the city, which is another big aspect of this world. The sense of Gotham's togetherness in adversity, the city as a character, is lightly brushed on, but it's there. And altogether, the film just has so many qualities I love. Obviously, it's hilarious, it's quotable, but I love that the opening music is identical to the Joker musical cue from The Dark Knight, and the general look of the film is beautiful. They do a callback to the Jerry Maguire line that's used in The Dark Knight, which drives home the romantic angle of Batman and the Joker. They have Voldemort in here, which is funny since Ray Fiennes voices Alfred in the movie. They have Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman long before the Batman was even conceived. I love how they attach a camera to realistic locations as if it's being shot in live action, which weirdly grounds the film. It's kind of like Avatar: The Way of Water in that way, and overall it just has a great cast. Like, look at this. This is ridiculous. And now obviously there is so much in this movie. It is so dense with references and ideas and homages, and this isn't a comprehensive list of all of that. I'm sure there's a video somewhere detailing all of it, but this is just a video about why I think this is the definitive Batman experience. And of course, I'm not saying this is the best movie with Batman in it. It's not even my favorite Batman movie, not even top 3, but I do think this is the movie that best defines the character of Batman. But that's just me. Have you seen the Lego Batman movie? If so, let me know what you think of it, let me know what you think of this video, and whether it's a definitive take on a classic comic book character or not. As always, keep watching movies.